Hi, everyone. Last week we talked about the structure of the paper as far as writing solid body paragraphs. This week we're going to focus on writing introductions and conclusions. And part of that we'll talk about thesis statements. And along with thesis statements, that's when we'll figure out what order to put those subtopics in your paper. So let's get started. Again, last week that's what we talked about, but this week we're going to get focus on how to get started and how to end this. A lot of this may look familiar from paper 2 when we talked about introductions and conclusions, but the thesis statement is different and the rest of it will serve as a pretty good reminder. So the introduction, as I'm sure you're aware, is what we start with. It's the first thing your reader reads, the first thing they have in any insight into your paper. This is where they decide if they're going to be interested or not, and they learn what your paper is going to be about. First thing you're going to do is catch their attention and provide an overview, whether that's opening with an interesting quote, an interesting fact or statistic. Also consider, are there any things that your readers need to know up front? Any unfamiliar terms that need to be defined? Any concepts that need to be defined? Anything like that. This is a time to kind of consider that. After that, you're going to do the purpose and rationale. This is the so what aspect of your paper. How does it fit in? What else is being discussed? Does your work fill any holes? Does it address any concerns that maybe aren't being talked about? How does your work fit into what's already out there? This lets you establish your expertise, your credibility, because it shows your readers that you are familiar with everything out there that's out there. You're just adding to the conversation. What we're going to focus on, and that's all familiar, what we're going to focus on today is writing a solid thesis. When it comes to argumentative writing, a well-developed thesis statement, it's your last sentence of your introduction, and it does three things. Or two things, anyway. It states your position, so your readers know what the paper is about and your position about it, what side you're taking, the stance you're taking, and then it lists the subtopics in the paper and the order they will be discussed in the paper. So if my topic of my paper is celebrities need to do more to engage to make their audiences aware of climate change. And then I could talk about subtopics like the responsibilities they have when they have a platform, the influence celebrities have over their followers and how that can change their perspectives. The opposing side would be that they don't need to talk about it at all. They just need to act or sing or whatever. And then the last topic could be how this really helps solve the problem. Then I'm going to list those topics, except for the opposing side, in my thesis statement. So the opposing side does not go into your thesis statement. Everything, all your other subtopics do. So let's look at an example that's broken down. And this is one from a paper that I would write on why we should have more disabled characters in the Arrowverse shows. So my position topic is highlighted in yellow, and then the main points are highlighted. The first one is in green, second one is pink, and the third one is blue. Studies into the benefits of representation, the variety of disabled characters from DC's source material comics, and the success of shows with positive representation proves that the time is right for the CW Arrowverse to provide a medium for positive representation of characters with disabilities. This tells my readers, my position is that these shows need to have disabled characters. That's my position. That's the majority of what my paper is about. That's the overall topic, that these characters are important. And my position is that these shows need to have the characters. My subtopics are the first thing my readers will read after reading this introduction. They'll read about the studies into the benefits of representation. After that, then they're going to read about the variety of disabled characters from DC's source material comics. And then last, they'll read about the success of shows with positive representation. The opposing side will be in my paper, will be between points 2 and 3. For this paper, I knew the opposing side would be people saying that these characters don't belong, or it's forcing an agenda, or it takes away from the show. And part of the way that I'm going to weaken that opposing side is that not only am I going to refute it in that paragraph, but I'm also going to try to couch subtopics around it in such a way that it kind of is already headed off. So I'm going to talk about how these characters are already in the comics, which then already heads off the argument that it's pushing an agenda or putting things into shows that aren't there by show. They're already in the comics. And if the other part of the opposing side tends to be that that stuff doesn't do very well, then I'm going to end with successive shows with positive rep. When choosing which my first subtopic will be, that could be just as simple as what's left over, or it could just be what's background. So the background information my readers will need in this topic is to know what representation is and why it's important. When trying to decide what order to put your main points in, again, the subtopics are main points in the thesis. That's the order your readers will read your subtopics or main points in your paper. The overall rough organization of your paper starts with the introduction paragraph, then a paragraph or more about main point 1 or subtopic 1, then a paragraph or more with main point or subtopic 2, a paragraph or more of the opposing side and your refutation, and then a paragraph or more of main point 3 or subtopic 3, and then the conclusion. And again, to go back what I just talked about, surround the opposing side with main points that help to show its weaknesses or flaws when you can. Let's look at some other examples. As seen in the character of Lily Sunder, pathologizing women's anger has resulted in the privileging of that anger, omitting women from showing emotion in the political sphere and labeling angry women as monstrous. That's my position, that we shouldn't pathologize women's anger, showing how it relates to the character of Lily Sunder. And then I have my subtopics, and my readers should know that's the order they're going to read about it. The Hollywood industry needs to look at the success of the film Rocketman and start showing the dark truth about addiction rather than glamorizing it, making it seem like it's not a real issue. For this one, my student has combined the position with their first point. The first subtopic is that Rocketman was a success, which connects with the thesis that we need to show the dark truth of addiction. Well, that's the second part. So that's the position. Rather than glamorizing it, or making it seem like it's not a real issue. So those are the three subtopics. Rocketman was successful, the glamorization of addiction in Hollywood, and also then pretending like it's not a real issue in Hollywood. Shameless serves an example of how we miss the mark when we come to treating addiction. That's the position by considering addiction as a personal failing, main point 1, ignoring the impact of addiction on those around the person with addiction, main point 2, and prioritizing criminalization over treatment, main point 3. When Taylor Swift sings about what would be different if she were the man, she brings attention to the gender double standard position. How it expect women to be celibate, main point 1, ladylike, main point 2, and demure, main point 3. And here's a whole example paragraph introduction that puts it together. Starting with trying to get the reader's attention, CW's tagline is Dare to Defy, and nowhere is that more prevalent than in the Arrowverse shows. Then I define Arrowverse. These shows take characters from DC Comics, place them in a relatively real-world situations in a weekly series format. Then I talk about what's going on in there, or say like where it fits in with everything. The shows themselves are made of diverse actors and diverse roles. Critics have, in fact, praised the Arrowverse for providing racial, gender, and sexual orientation representation. However, there's still more to be done, especially when it comes to disability. That shows where my paper fits in the overall discussion of these shows. And then I went to the thesis statement that we've already looked at. So, okay, that's the introduction that gets started. Then you write your body paragraphs. How do you end it? Again, this is going to be a lot of review from what we talked about with paper 2, because what makes a good conclusion is what makes a good conclusion. Revisiting, again, we're returning to the theme or themes of the introduction to bring the reader full circle. This is a good time to really point to anything of the introduction that maybe the reader may have forgotten about, or kind of feels like a circular ending where we're wrapping it up. Synthesizing arguments, showing how the points you make connect to how you supported them. This is also a good point to remind the reader of any main points you may have overlooked, or you may think that they have forgotten by the time they get to your paper. So what game? Again, pointing to what all this matters, what it matters beyond just this paper. This is why this point is significant. And then what do you do about it now? And this is the one that I think is the really useful one, especially when writing about social issues. If I'm talking about a social issue and how it's a problem, then at the end of it, maybe I want to point to what can be done. And here's a sample conclusion. Jose Alanis argues in Death, Disability, and the Superhero, the Silver Age and Beyond, if someone's personhood is in doubt or seen as lacking, all the easier to direct death wishes at them, and so on. Positive representation of disability overcomes the doubtful personhood we place on disabled people. While the Arrowverse must be commended for their work on bringing some of DC's most beloved characters to work and their representation in some areas, including gender, race, sexuality, and economic status, their omission of disabled characters cannot be ignored. The enormous benefits of representation, the multitude of DC disabled characters, and the success of media with representation shows that these characters deserve to have their time in the sun, or at least on the screen. As we fight for greater inclusion and accessibility in education, the workplace, and our communities for those of us with disabilities, the inclusion of disabled characters in shows such as those on the CW will be one of our greatest assets. That's that so what. This is why this matters. By showing disability does not omit one from becoming a superhero, we prove that it also does not omit one from participating equitably in society. So I want to give this idea, this is why this matters. I want to wrap it up and remind my readers, it's not just because I want to see some of my favorite characters like Batgirl on the screen. It's because it matters beyond that. Use your conclusion as a way to show why that matters. And that's it for this lesson. If you have questions, please let me know. Otherwise, happy writing, and I look forward to seeing your papers.